Hi everyone. Today we are talking about one of the most beloved and misunderstood characters in lipidology, HDL, the so-called good cholesterol. For decades, HDL has been celebrated as a knight in shining armor of cardiovascular disease prevention. Patients often brag about their high HDL numbers like they're a ticket to immortality. But reputations can be misleading. Does HDL really deserve all that credit? Let's find out. Welcome to LipidCurious, the podcast dedicated to demystifying lipids for medical boards and real-world clinical practice. I'm your host, Dr. Vishnupriya Pulipati, a board-certified endocrinologist and lipidologist. This is Season 1, Episode 6, HDL and reverse cholesterol transport. Here's what we'll cover together. 1. Why is HDL called good cholesterol? And is that nickname really fair? 2. What exactly is reverse cholesterol transport and why does it matter? 3. Why did drugs that raise HDL fail to improve cardiovascular outcomes? You'll find a bonus visual handout in the show notes, and if you want everything in one place, I recommend heading to www.lipidcurious.com. There, you'll find the full visual set for Season 1 plus the free starter kit. This is a collection of practical clinical guides, cheat sheets, and quick references you can actually use in your clinical practice. And as always, this podcast is for educational purposes only, not medical advice. All right, let's dive in. Why is HDL cholesterol called the good cholesterol? HDL or high-density lipoprotein is a small, dense, protein-rich particle. Its signature protein apolipoprotein A1 defines its structure and function. In 1970s, researchers proposed the HDL hypothesis. This suggests that people with low HDL were more likely to develop heart diseases. Later, population studies, including the landmark Framingham study, have consistently linked higher HDL to lower cardiovascular risk. That simple observation earned HDL the nickname the good cholesterol. The idea was intuitive. HDL appeared to be a cleanup crew, sweeping up excess cholesterol from the arterial walls and hauling it back to the liver for disposal. So if HDL was protective, the logic was simple. Let's raise it. And so began decades of research and drug development aimed at boosting HDL cholesterol levels. But here's the twist. Raising HDL cholesterol on paper didn't consistently lower heart diseases or strokes. That was the first clue that HDL's reputation as good cholesterol was an oversimplification. Here's the nuance. HDLC, the lab number, tells us how much cholesterol is being carried inside these HDL particles. It says nothing about whether these particles are functional. So a high HDL number doesn't guarantee protection. What really matters is HDL function, its ability to actually remove the cholesterol from the peripheral tissue and delivering it back to the liver. And in certain conditions like diabetes mellitus, kidney diseases, or inflammation, HDL particles can even become dysfunctional or harmful. So what exactly is reverse cholesterol transport and why does it matter? Reverse cholesterol transport is HDL's most important job. Think of it as the body's cleanup system for cholesterol. Most cells can't break cholesterol down once they have got it. So when cholesterol starts piling up in the wrong places, like inside the macrophages in the arterial walls, the body needs a way to get it out. That's where HDL steps in. I'll walk you through the main steps here. The detailed enzymes and transporters are in the visual guide at www.lipidcurious.com. Here's the journey in simple, plain terms. Step 1. Liver and intestine secretes apolipoprotein A1, an empty protein scaffold floating in the blood. Step 2. ApoA1 interacts with transporters like ABCA1 on macrophages. These transporters give the cholesterol onto the ApoA1, forming a nascent HDL particle. I like to imagine these nascent HDL particles as flat pita breads which are empty and starting to fill up. Step 3. As these nascent HDL particles travel in the bloodstream, the enzyme LCAT on them esterifies the cholesterol into cholesterol esters and packages into the core, reshaping the pita bread into a round, mature HDL sphere. Step 4. From there, the HDL has two ways to go back to the liver once it's full of that cholesterol coming from the periphery. Direct delivery through the SRB1 receptor, or indirect delivery where the HDL swaps its cargo with one of the ApoB particles like VLDL or LDL through CETP enzyme. So these particles are anyway on their way back to the liver, so the HDL exchanges its cholesterol with these VLDL or LDL particles, which take that cholesterol back to the liver via LDL receptors. Final step. Once in the liver, cholesterol can be turned into bile acids or secreted into bile and eventually leaves the body through the intestines. Why does it matter? Because without reverse cholesterol transport, macrophage foam cells build up in the arteries, plaques grow, and cardiovascular disease risk escalates. Now that's a textbook version of how HDL does its job, but in real life, things are rarely that clean. So let me share a clinical wrinkle, one that shows up all the time in our practices. In the setting of high triglycerides, this story gets more complicated. CETP helps trade cholesterol ester from HDL for triglycerides from VLDL and chylomicrons. So the HDLs become triglyceride rich because they took the triglycerides from the VLDL and the chylomicron, and cholesterol poor because they gave it away to these particles. Then as HDL is traveling in the bloodstream, the lipoprotein lipase, which is waiting at the peripheral tissues to absorb the triglyceride, trims these overloaded HDL particles down, leaving small, shrunken, dense, dysfunctional HDL particles. Now here's the kicker. These small HDL particles don't hang around too much. The kidneys filter them out, and the ApoA1 which is left gets broken down. So overall, the HDL levels drop. This pattern leads to high triglycerides, low HDL, and small dense LDL particles. This is a hallmark of atherogenic dyslipidemia. Why drugs that raise HDL often fail? We have all heard it in the clinic. My HDL is 90, so I must be heart attack proof, right? But here's the catch. Association is not causation. Low HDL is a marker of high cardiovascular disease risk, but high HDL doesn't guarantee cardiovascular disease protection. And the clinical trials made that painfully clear. Let's first talk about niacin, which was one of the first big bets. It raised HDL by 20 to 30%. But in large clinical trials like AIM-HIGH or HPS2 Thrive, adding niacin to statins didn't reduce cardiovascular events. Worse, it caused more side effects. Next up, CETP inhibitors. These looked more promising. Torcetrapib raised HDL by more than 70%. But instead of preventing disease, it increased blood pressure, worsened cardiovascular outcomes, and raised mortality, leading to trials termination. Other CETP inhibitors such as dalcetrapib and evacetrapib also failed. Anacetrapib showed modest benefit, but most of that was from lowering LDL-C, not raising HDL. So why did these medications fail? These are my thoughts. 1. Function matters, not concentration. Raising the HDL-C number doesn't guarantee effective reverse cholesterol transport, which is the primary reason HDL is considered protective on cardiovascular risk. 2. Mechanisms can misfire. Some drugs, such as torcetrapib, produce larger but dysfunctional HDL particles, which is actually linked to increased cardiovascular disease risk. 3. Off-target effects. Torcetrapib raised blood pressure, wiping out the potential benefits. 4. The real villains are ApoB particles. LDL, VLDL, IDL. These are true drivers of atherosclerosis like we discussed previously. That's why statins, PCSK9 inhibitors, and other ApoB lowering therapies consistently reduce cardiovascular events while HDLC raising drugs don't. 5. Extremely high HDL may not be good. In some studies, HDL above 90 or 100 mg per deciliter was linked to increased mortality, creating a U-shaped curve of risk. So very low or very high HDL were not really protective. A paradoxically high HDL may be a marker for genetic or environmental factors affecting cardiovascular health. So the clinical lesson here is HDL is important, but the lab number is not the whole story. Our focus should remain on lowering ApoB-containing lipoproteins, improving metabolic health, and interpreting the entire lipid profile in the context. And the HDL story isn't over. Research is ongoing into HDL function, subtypes, and therapies. Did you know that in some infections and autoimmune diseases, HDL actually flips from being anti-inflammatory to pro-inflammatory? So instead of calming the fire, it adds to the fuel. That's how complex this HDL particle really is. So here are my take-home points. 1. HDL good cholesterol reputation comes from the early observational studies, but that label oversimplifies a much more complex story. 2. HDL's true value lives in its function, reverse cholesterol transport, not in the cholesterol number reported on the lab value. 3. In practice, lowering ApoB-containing lipoproteins remains the proven path to reducing cardiovascular risk. HDL is important, but it's not the main target for therapy. Our journey with HDL is far from over. HDL remains fascinating and complex, but don't be fooled by the number. All right, folks. Thanks for tuning into LipidCurious. If today's episode was helpful, share it with a friend or colleague. I'd love to hear your suggestions, feedback, or if you just want to connect, you can reach out to me at hello@lipidcurious.com. Be sure to subscribe or follow so you don't miss what's next. And don't forget, you can download the free starter kit and Season 1 visual guide at www.lipidcurious.com. Until next time, stay curious and stay confident. Signing off, Dr. Pulipati.